All right. Hello, everyone. This is Will Baggett. We're going to discuss the compromised Conti chats and the methodology used to process those as a cyber threat intelligence analyst. Thank you for tuning in to BSides Charlotte. It's greatly appreciated. It's a fantastic local hacker convention they put on in Charlotte, and it's an honor to be part of it. So, I'm Will Baggett, certified combat collection engineer. That's an older certification I got when I was teaching NATO Special Forces, certified fraud examiner, other certs too, but for this course, this class, it's relevant. Very short career path, so you know the filter that I'm coming through for the approach for this talk. I was in financial tech, worked for SunTrust pre-Y2K. From there, got recruited. I went to the intelligence community, did a lot of stuff and things in the cyber world, human collection. From that, decided to resign and stay in the Charlotte area instead of moving back to DC. Worked for a couple of years in Belgium as a NATO Special Forces cyber instructor, teaching drone forensics, phone forensics, desktop, OSINT training. The drone forensics is a lot of fun. Good way to get in trouble. Thing called COVID hit. I ended up getting a job as an insider threat consultant to a large pharmaceutical firm during COVID. After that ended, I went to a cyber threat intelligence role where I am now. It's a fantastic company, but we're not going to mention their name because I'd have to get company concurrence. Legal would have to approve the conversation, and that just takes things way too long. So we won't mention who I'm working for. This talk is going to cover four main topics: the Conti ransomware group, the Russian-Ukrainian cyber warfare efforts that have been ongoing since 2014. What is insider threat? What does that mean? Because it's such a compartmented, stovepipe, esoteric, Byzantine, there's some $3 words for you, discipline part of cyber. Some people may or may not know what it does, so we'll touch on that. And the last, in the core of the presentation, is the Carver analysis method and how that applied to what was leaked out. So for the audience, because this is a 15-minute talk, 40 minutes-ish with time for questions in real person time, real space. The red slides with the background is where we would stop. If we had a week, we'd pivot to an open exercise. I leave that there just as a thought for if you want to play after the talk or pause and go try whatever I'm suggesting, great. The yellow slides are things that were found from the leak that happened months or years after the leak, well, a year and a half after the leak. That way you can differentiate what the slides mean. All right, ransomware. So if you've been watching the news, if this is the talk back in Vegas, definitely it's a topic of concern. Ransomware and the variant of wiperware are a gang of criminals, usually sometimes funded by nation states, will send malware, find exploited vulnerability, and do reconnaissance, exfiltrate key data, and then once they have the key data, they have a team of experts, of consultants that will go through and determine how big the payout can be from a company. And once that's executed, they'll have a name and shame to try and gauge on how deep we want to go for this. A name and shame for Caesars has been breached. Here's some of the data. They refused to pay the ransom to get their data back, so we're going to start publicly embarrassing them. A variant that came out of the Russian-Ukraine effort has been wiperware. Same thing, but instead of holding the data hostage for money, they'll just completely wipe the data. From a pure academic point of view, it's better than kinetic strikes, loss of life, or ransomware where the data could be gone. The data's gone, the hardware's recoverable. No one's generally dead unless you get power supply, water supply, food supply, but generally it's a less destructive method of cyber warfare. So Conti is a Russian-based ransomware group that came out in mid-2020. They do the extraction, the name and shame, just like Alpha, just like the other big ransomware groups, Clop, using MoveIT. And it came out later, not to get ahead of myself, but this is a fundraising element of the Russian government. They'll take the ransom, millions of dollars, and send it back to the Russian government to use in the Russian illegal invasion of Ukraine. So in 2021, Conti far outperformed the rest of the ransomware groups, not completely combined, but very close, $180 million per year in revenue. they'll attack, usually same method, excuse me. They'll either send a phishing link, spray the passwords, they'll use a CVE that's not been patched to gain access. Once they have access to the data, they'll exfiltrate it to their command site, and then they'll send the ransom email. We can see them step through here. Also, don't connect to these C2 sites from your corporate laptop. That gives the imprint to the ransomware operator that you have an interest in them. That puts you on the radar. That gives nights, weekends, overtime hours. That's a paperwork generating event. We don't want those in cyber. So to tie all this together, May 2021, Colonial Pipeline, and those of us here on the East Coast were definitely impacted by that. Colonial Pipeline had, not to editorialize, this is the first talk for the conference, and we don't need Will editorializing this early in the morning. Colonial Pipeline had quite a few cyber vacancies open, unfulfilled. They weren't taking the cyber security role for this infrastructure quite as serious as they should. And DarkSide sent a phishing email to one of the administrators at Colonial Pipeline that locked up the billing system. And then we had gasoline shortages on the East Coast for at least a solid week, if not longer, disrupted the East Coast economy just from one ransomware attack. So cyber security began to pivot a little bit more to paying attention to what ransomware was doing. We're now more in tune with it, seeing the damage that can be done. The transitioning from that to the Russian-Ukrainian cyber warfare effort. A couple of things to get in here. There's a lot of new techniques that have happened. The one we would talk about in NATO SOP is a wall of text. But it was a brilliant combined effort when Ukrainian troops would land near the Russian border, activate their phones, one to bring your personal phone to battle, right? The Ukrainian soldiers would get a text saying, you are surrounded, you are abandoned, you are going to die in the battlefield. Concurrently, the soldiers' families get text messages saying your son has been killed in action. The parents then call or text the family member in the war zone, which is doing quite a few things. It's triangulating their location, it's validating their OSINT, it's generating telemetry for SIGINT collection. So this is a fairly complex effort by Russia to demoralize the Ukrainian troops. And if they can find your cell phone on the network, you can easily locate them with mortar shells, artillery, which is pretty devastating in combat. So this is something we were training the NATO coalition troops that when you go into combat, you don't need to have your electronic devices with you, because it's everything from U.S. Special Forces down to one of my students was a cherry farmer out of one of the former Soviet states. Doesn't understand cyber truly, but outstanding sniper, which is what you need on the battlefield, but he needs to understand if I'm still on camera, can't bring these things with you because it is going to give away your location. Ukraine also had some fantastic psychological operations. During the conflict, they released a list of all the Russian spies they claimed were operating in Europe. Names, addresses, SIM card numbers, IMSIs, a list of all the foreign service workers for the Russian Federation. Whether or not all 620 were truly Russian intelligence operatives doesn't matter, because now they have the label of being one. So even though they may have had the most benign job working for the embassy gathering contacts for grain export, I don't know. But now that they've been tainted as being a possible Russian foreign service worker, I can't talk today, possible Russian spy, they've now been isolated and their ability to operate in Europe has been severely degraded. Now, if we were in a classroom, we'd pivot over to Bellingcat and we'd look at some of the work Bellingcat has done where they can take the Russians as they change identities, go overseas, conduct assassination operations, like the famous one where they two operatives claimed they went to London or went to Britain to look at a mosque or look at a church, and then flew home the day after the Russian dissident was murdered. Bellingcat has gone through, sifted the OSINT details, and been able to identify each FSB officer. So this would be something we would spend 30, 45 minutes on to determine what can you find as a new student for OSINT on the Russian intelligence operations. Of course, the intelligence services react to this, and in Acrylic, our friend is saying, I'm telling you right now, that Russian Foreign Service officer is not real. So that's a pretty good psychological trick. Another one, NATO talked about, both sides, for Russians and NATO allies, both created fake Tinder profiles to catfish and elicit information from each side. Again, you're in a war zone? Looking for love on Tinder is probably a bad idea, but here we are. So Russia invades Ukraine, February 2022. The cyber threat intelligence team, we were directed, where I am, to monitor for new threats from the Russian invasion because they promised to take down the U.S. economy for anyone who assists the resistance to Russia. So we mentioned the Colonial Pipeline exploit that was still fresh in our minds. Less than a year later, Russia invades Ukraine. Conti puts out a statement saying, we thoroughly support Russia. If anyone attacks Russia, we'll use our resources to go against them. That goes up to a spot report, goes up to leadership. Well, 2 hours later, Conti just says, well, maybe not. We're not taking, they're trying to backpedal. I don't need to read the wall of text to you. Something happened to where they're trying to backpedal and dissemble from being closely tied to Russia. Most of us on the team found that a little bit odd. Most of the threat intelligence community and cyber community, as well as intelligence community, yeah, something's up with that. We say, who was Conti? Because that was the moment where Conti, as they would say back in the 70s, jumped the shark, things go south. The first emails start going out that Conti is leaking all the data. There's a very specific file name, -xv, was it? Geez, I can't see today. xzvf1.tzg. That's a very special file name. That wouldn't be hard to find at all with Splunk on your network. They said we're going to leak everything internally. So he's got recurring access. Things have been staged. And this starts to grow just like any other viral event on the internet. Headlines start coming out. The security researcher, we can't say that he was part of the sole Ukrainian working for Conti. He leaked 60,000 messages belonging to the ransomware gang. He released everything. So the first thing that goes up, and again, the red student exercise, we can see by the date, joined February 2022. This wasn't something he's had ready to leak. This is a spur of the moment decision. This wasn't. There's one Russian ransomware that hit a mortgage provider that never really made the U.S. news, but the leak came from an account dedicated to discussion of this months before the actual ransomware hit. So right here, realizing we're not live and I can't point and you can't see me, who are they following? Who are their followers? Who's retweeting this? Who's quoting? And if I was a foreign service adversary, I would say, this is of interest. Who's looking at this? Journalist, intelligence analyst, sock puppets for more seasoned threat intelligence analysts who are not using their true name and not using true location, they're using a VPN. There's a lot of intelligence you can gather from this in and of itself. Also, you don't have to go in and follow them. You can just remember twitter.com/ContiLeaks and not burn yourself that your corporate Twitter account is now following the Conti leaks, that you have interest in this. So again, if this is a class, would probably take 30 minutes to discuss this, go through, do some analysis. There are some where you can see the Facebook links of official Army units and see all the people who like and thumbs up or whatever. I'm not on Facebook. Everyone who's congratulating the colonel on his recent award. Okay, now we can go through and see everyone who's interested in this one action. Same thing here. Why are you following this? I know we're going to talk about Conti, but getting to the data takes a little bit of operational security. What I would do is go to tinfoleak.com, twitterinfoleak.com, and then I would plug in Conti leaks and my email address, and I'll get a free report to my email. They're not. I've been using this site for a few years. It's not spammy. And now I get names, GPS. I would get a report where I can see what's coming in from this account. This may or may not work still. Another OPSEC exercise we would do to say, for the damage for things that can be leaked, I would have the students go open Twitter, just do a simple search for my new debit card. And this blossomed out from a 20-minute exercise to a 4-hour exercise because of just the things people find that you wouldn't believe. No, we're in cyber or getting started or experience, doesn't matter. But this is still a mind-numbing, just, you have to shut the lid and worry about the state of humanity, that people are still advertising and sharing their new debit card, their new passport, their new airplane tickets. So you can see that, leaks happen. Not only do they happen on a very personal level, they happen on a nation state level, but it's out there. Getting back into this, I like to give the idea of not just a talk, but here's something you can work with to help learn the concept a little bit more. The leaker went through, separated these out. This is great. They're all in acrylic, and you can see when the leaks are starting to come out. Someone translates them to English. Now things truly take off. 393 messages, 60,694 total. Everything. And the ROC means everything. Source code, plans, intents, software quality assurance testing, onboarding, daily chit chat that we see in Teams, not the 38 terabytes of Teams AI data that was leaked from Microsoft. Oops. This is dedicated just to Conti only. So the yellow background is current stuff. So right before I gave this presentation at BSides Las Vegas, they found a year and 3 months later that yes, there is a connection between Conti leaders and Russian government contacts. This is a nation state operated endeavor from the Russian intelligence service. This is something that wasn't determined until months after analysis. So you got your triage, and that's where we're going to get to, the triage of the immediate impact to my company versus the deep CIA, DIA, NSA, FBI-ish level of analysis. So we've seen what the insider threat can do. We've seen what the one actor did. What is an insider threat? Usually when we're dealing with a data breach, we're discussing an external actor who's discovered a misconfigured C3 bucket for Amazon, a SolarWinds massive breach like we dealt with in 2021, the more recent MGM Caesars breach brought on by ransomware, but it's usually there's a hole in the dam and water's pouring forward as opposed to someone working in the dam who actually opens the lever to let data out, whether it's Edward Snowden with his NSA leaks, Robert Hansen disclosing the key data of very protected identities of people working against the Russians inside Russia, or Nebula betraying the Avengers team because you had 2014 Nebula with 2023 Avengers team for the Battle of New York. And people use science fiction and adventure movies because we have so many NDAs that we have things that have happened we can't discuss. We can go to the commonalities of science fiction movies. That's why people do this. It only takes one unexpected action to breach your organization. No one's expecting this. No one thought the one Ukrainian researcher on the team would leak this out. No one thought that, I'm pointing to the screen like y'all can see me. No one thought the one shield ring over Scarif would be the weak point, even though it is very strong. It's shielding physical incursion. It's shielding transmissions out. If you physically damage it with another spaceship, just like we saw here with a Hammerhead Corvette, and take out that literal firewall, then the data is going to be able to escape. Just like Clop with MoveIT, we're still logging hundreds of breached organizations from this combination. So the traditional motivations for espionage, I don't know if it was CIA training class or a Tom Clancy novel where it came from. Tom Clancy novels were so close to accuracy that we began using a lot of his writings for training. So I'm not sure if it's chicken and egg thing, but the ideology is mice: money, ideology, conscience or compromise, ego or excitement. So we definitely have ideology. This leaker's country has been invaded by Russia. We have conscience, and then we have probably more, I don't know if the ego or excitement. He said, I can stand up, I can do something about this. Getting into the deeper motivations for espionage: rascals, reciprocity, authority, scarcity, commitment, career, liking, social proof. Those are more in-depth behavioral analysis of an asset rather than just ascribing motivation to one internal leaker. However, these are also the very same effective elements of phishing emails, which is what we just had that took down MGM Caesar's Palace, which is why the slot machines are showing bio screens and doing hand-paved paper receipts right now at the time of this talk. So this insider threat, it was a one-time event because after he's leaked everything out, he's not coming back. He's not reapplying to rejoin Conti. He's lost his access. He should have. He should have been offboarded at this point. Directly attributable to one individual, and the damage is unquantifiable. They are no longer a threat. They've tried to resurface and use some of the same C2, but it's not there. It's not happening. The data was compartmentalized by Conti, but not effectively. You had people who thought that Conti was operating as a pen testing. They thought they were like a Bishop Fox or a Mandant instead of a ransomware group. The data was staged, it was organized. They were showing the exact things that we would look for as insider threat analysts. They're staging the data for reconnaissance, for exfiltration, they're conducting reconnaissance, they're harvesting the data. So this would be another discussion for insider threat, not the venue, but to get the idea going. How would you detect this behavior? Would it be a leadership issue? Would it be sensors through EDR software? Would it be a Splunk dashboard? How would you do this? Does he have a personal Conti laptop for this data? If you're harvesting $180 million per year for a small team, you should probably have your own laptops. So how is this individual leaking the data out? Did he copy the data and email it from a secondary site? I.e., did he use USBs to get the data out, just like UNC, was it 58 out of China is now using North Korea, using USBs with Sobu? This just broke right before my talk. So how are they getting the data? These are the things I would look at, a little bit after the fact, but how is he getting the data? How can we change this in our organization so we don't have massive breaches again if we can survive this leak? So pivoting back to the CTI chair, giving this talk exactly from where I processed the first leak, we have raw intelligence from an unknown source with alleged firsthand access. Is this propaganda? Usually when you have a battlefield data find, talking about drone forensics, if a drone crashes on the compound of whatever site, whatever, we're here in Charlotte, we'll go with the 2 nuclear sites that Duke Energy has on Lake Wylie. If a drone crashes here at the Catawba River site, it's going to be a small incident. Probably security is going to get involved, should. Again, I'm not eliciting, I don't work for Duke. Why is the drone here? Was it just someone who landed their DJI because they lost signal? Is it an active red team exercise? Or is it a hostile actor trying to get in? It's a small team that's handling this. So we would process the 2 SD cards, the SD card from the drone that has the video, the audio, the video and the pictures of where this drone has been. Because the first time people send a drone up, they spin it around and they usually look at themselves as the first photo, so we can get a lot of context clues as to who owns the drone. Because that second SD chip underneath the motherboard, people don't think to wipe that. But it's tightly held. It's only a small team processing this. It's not put online for everyone to see. So the mass distribution of data from this conflict now that they've uploaded, all the intelligence analysts have access to this raw data from the Russia-Ukraine war. Here in TKK, South Carolina, I'm processing this data, the same data that it could be in a war zone, but now I've got it right here, release the same. It's a different paradigm we're dealing with. So the key thing is all this data is out there from the ransomware operator. What do we need to know? How do we handle this? Because most people haven't been in war zones to process this. It's been through SANS training or cybersecurity classes. It's a different ballgame. Going back to the NATO fundraising, who was Conti there? You see the NATO fella bonking the invaders. Conti's pretty much dead after this leak. The methodology we used with Carver, it was developed in World War II by the OSS, precursor to the CIA, for indigenous field agents, the French, to be able to rapidly analyze the key components of the German war effort, of this one train track leaving this one facility that produces ball bearings. If we take this out, then they can't produce ball bearings, they can't produce ammunition, and you see the supply chain crumble because this one key intersection on a rail line was destroyed. There's a mathematical formula that's not software. The Carver site now will give you software you can download, you can pay for it, of course, you can get certified, and it's just like anything with cyber. And you can plug in the values to identify it, but that, of course, World War II, you didn't have computers, you didn't have software to download, you couldn't like and subscribe. It was a very simple methodology that was taught so that people could see, here's what we need to reinforce, or here's where we can attack most effectively. So to read the slide to you, criticality, accessibility, recoverability, vulnerability, effect, and recognizability. These are our key components. And the thought I had preparing for this, the insider threat knows the key weakness of a system. At the bank I worked at, well, SunTrust, I said that earlier, on the new teller system, it's now 25 years ago, it's not sensitive, geez, 25 years. If you clicked this box and processed a payment and clicked this box to also process, the two would be caught in an endless loop cycle, and it would crash the entire banking network. We taught people in training, don't do these two combined because you'll take the system down until the software is rewritten, excuse me. Only because I'm being recorded. We've seen the meme that says, the entire banking system rests on that one Windows Office 95 file running Excel. What's that one spreadsheet that can control everything for your company? For most situations, grading by criticality and effect is enough. What's the most important and what's going to be the biggest bang for the buck? So employing the Carver matrix, we can more easily identify the vulnerable targets. I need to change that slide, I'm sorry. We're going to see the highest risk, the most, and it may not be what you think it's going to be. So here's the actual spreadsheet, some from the Carver website. 5 is the most important, 1 is the least. So the lowest value you could have, 1 times 6 would be a 6. So if we sum it up, 1's all the way across versus 5. So 30 would be the most important, whereas a 6 would be the least important. So talking through the criticality of Conti, I'm not going to discuss the full chart here. That'd be filler, right? The most important thing are the crown jewels, their source code. How can we mitigate this? What are their IOCs? What are their TTPs? So their infrastructure, to rebuild that, it can be done, but it's going to be some effort. The source code, though, the actual ransomware source code, that's, again, the crown jewels. If they lose that, they're going to have to rebuild from everything. And the other twin to that are the core designers. You have staff, the people running the ransomware, the people doing recon, the people who think they're part of just a red team. They can be replaced. They can get new people. I say that as today as Citibank in Charlotte is announcing reorgs and layoffs, so that's not a good thing to bring up. Credentials are, I don't want to say a dime a dozen, it's more like $1 per cred maybe, but you can always get more creds on the dark market. If creds don't work, there's always phishing. But if Conti were to lose their crown jewels, we can see here's a score of 27. It's the most important thing they have. The core designers going through vulnerability. We don't really think the core designers of the Conti ransomware package are going to flip and betray their own company. So we can see that was the delta between making the core designers the most vulnerable, the most important part of Conti versus credentials. We need to protect credentials, but if you lose the person who understands what to do once you're in the door with those leak creds, there's no ransomware game. Going through the company where I am, the crown jewels, the PII, if we were to lose our core business function, a lot of the U.S. economy would not do well. We recognize that. That's why we've got that the most protected. For recuperability, if we were to lose the crown jewels for what we do, that would disable, again, a lot of the economy. Credentials, yes, those can be detected, those can be reset, those can be changed once we know the leak is there. But down here, our reputation, if we no longer have the U.S. economy's faith that we can process what we do, like the Fed Reserve, we're gone. People are going to find an alternate method to do what we do. Our company is going to go out of business with trillions of dollars of impact to the economy. The staff isn't so much vulnerable. It's our reputation and the loss of that core business methodology. So now that we know what my company's most vulnerable firm is, we can pivot and invest in securing those. What's the one question from SysUp courses? The one takeaway is you don't spend $100 on a fence to protect a $10 cow. I had too many, but that's the same thing here. If we lose our reputation at this company, as I see their logo all the way around me here, then we're out of business. That's it. So the next slide, if you want to get ready and get a screenshot, there's a blank Conti template in the actual class, in the actual course this morning at BSides Las Vegas. I need more coffee. The course at BSides Charlotte, we'd step through and pick a company at random, and we discuss the pros, cons, strengths, and weaknesses for the different steps and actually step through the scoring on this. Excuse me. So Conti defines their crown jewels as the network file or shares, other data that other companies had that can be exfiltrated. The emails, address lists, contact information for phishing, their databases, what they have of interest, obviously the source code, the accounting information for their consultants to see what money they have, what insurance policy they have for ransomware, what's the maximum we can get to actually reasonably get paid from this organization. Design documents, is there another segment of the network we're unaware of? That's a big thing because as we've seen, not casting blame, but with the Caesars Palace MGM breaches, it doesn't appear the networks are segmented so that the elevators and the slot machines shouldn't both go down at the same time, but here we are. I'm not putting a lot of screenshots out there from the leak. One of them you can see they go through for the financial records of a named company, and you can see what they're going for, the balance sheets to see what assets are truly held. So pivoting from that, how does the U.S. community define intelligence? We had an acronym THINKA. It's not classified, obviously, just us in here openly. THINKA, foreign of interest. It's new information. It's not historical. Clandestinely acquired, and it's authoritative. So you have that fine line of, yeah, it's OSINT. They didn't mean to put it out there, but we got it. There's a little bit of gray land now for some of this. And the joke we have for THINKA, for I am, intelligence is of the financial industry, it's of interest, it's new, and the joke is it's copied and pasted from Bleeping Computer and is authoritative because there's so much copying and pasting in threat intelligence. So we know this is good. We know he had access. We know it was released. We understand why it was released. Putting the lens of what we'd have as a mad minute when we'd meet a foreign asset or meet another officer overseas. Security, how much time do you have? Did you have your trouble getting here? Do you know of any imminent threats? When can we have our next meeting? And what's our cover for meeting? Well, in this context, I'm not worried about the next meeting. I'm not worried about cover. I'm in cyber threat intelligence. I can't talk today. Cyber threat intelligence for this company. I'm not worried about cover. This is my full job. It's what I do. But the imminent threat, are we under attack? Are we on the radar? When's the next attack coming? And what intent do they have to this segment of the U.S. financial industry? What are their overall plans and intents? So I am definitely applying that. Don't want to do like some, watching my words, other people, where you would see, is your credit card number in a hacker's database? And people say, oh, I wouldn't do this, right? You wouldn't. Obviously, to us, this is a joke. It shouldn't really work. But on the dark web, we've had to train. There are sites on the dark web. We have all the CIA's records for the past 10 years. Enter your assets crypt, enter your operation name, enter your tool name to see if there's leaked data on it. Pro tip, there's nothing going to be there. They're harvesting the intelligence from those searches to then pivot to see what's out there on those. You're just giving them data they don't know. So we want to get this data offline. And what we want to look for, going for our Carver chart, we want to look for these core things. Are we targeted? First and foremost, is there an imminent threat to this company? Yes or no? Then doing the same search across this, what threads do we have leaked? What's the velocity of African swallow? Is company X listed in this for both targeting and leak credentials? As soon as I parsed that and saw, okay, we're not on the X, we don't have any leak credentials. Spot report went up to leadership that we parsed the data. So far, this core program's name isn't there. We don't have credentials, we're not on the X. However, our third-party partners that we work with, are they targeted? Well, that's a separate team. We can offload that to other people, depending on the size of your team. That's a secondary target. That's important. But first, you have, like the airplane, you have to take care of your own mask first. Then going through and pivoting for the IOCs, CDs, and TTPs that are in play. So these are all equal. Some are more equal than others. July 30th, 2023, CISA stated that roughly 87% of all attacks are due to compromised accounts. So going back a slide, if we can see that we don't have leaked credentials from this, they don't have phishing email templates ready to hit my organization, and I can say that, okay, 87-ish, 88-ish% of successful attacks due to compromised account. Now we're only worried about 12%, and pivoting back here to what CVEs are in play. So using Carver, we're going after the direct threats, the leaked credentials. That might be more of a credential management team and an IAM team, depends on how your company does it. That's what we're looking for. The malware, I've got the source code, that's cool. We'll let someone else with a different machine, not online, not connected to the main corporate network, do your reverse engineering. You can see the testing revisions. You can see on this laptop with this browser, Conti doesn't work, but it works here. You can see them step through and start to get their quality assurance in place. The insider threat, you can see the roles, how this happened. You can see the compartmentalization kind of worked, but it kind of didn't. For credentials, there's a lot of credentials in this data dump. But because we have to use operational security and respect the other people's data, it would look like this: username, gom.com, .gov, whatever, password be redacted, there you go. A lot of breach password managers. If I shared that, that would lead to hiring attorneys and posting, I'm open for work on LinkedIn because I violated some NDAs for these other companies. We don't need that. There you go. You can see a lot of the creds that are there. They're blacked out. Bada boom, bada bing. A lot of strong passwords there, but they're still leaked because, I'll forget the name, but a lot of these bots will go after the password managers. It's shared in clear text, leaked in clear text. So don't go back and just add a number to the end and say, well, I've updated it. That's not a good thing either. So the Conti operator from the leak, they're using phishing to go after vulnerabilities and credentials, and then with that, they'll create a spear phishing for the target organization. It's a diamond model. I really wanted to use that S that everyone drew in elementary school and junior high at least once in my career. So there you go. It's a diamond model, but with the S. So again, this is kind of getting granular. You download the data on an air-gapped machine off the corporate network. You don't assume this is good data. It could be still a honeypot operation. Once I have the data, make a copy, secondary, third copy, paste, primary, alternate, contingency, emergency is always a good backup plan. Searching for the corporate names, there are, I won't say billion, there's a lot of ways to parse data, whether you're using Control F in Notepad, whether you bring it into something like Analyst Notebook, Nuix, excuse me. But as long as you use the methodology, you don't need an expensive $30,000 per year piece of software to search for it, or you don't need to wait for your third-party threat intelligence provider to tell you you're on the X. You can search for this yourself. Inevitably, someone will ask, can I use AI? I wouldn't use AI. I wouldn't trust my job, my company, my reputation personally to AI to catch the nuances of searching. Yeah, I know eventually I'll get to that point. Right now, I don't feel comfortable with it. That's me. Also, there's some spicy stuff in the chats. And do you want to trust the Russian ransomware operators that their things they're discussing, I'm being very polite, aren't going to get you fired? There's things in some of the chats that, yeah. There's a lot of just glazed over there. So listening is one thing. People can put this on mute. You can, again, read the chart. Once we saw we weren't on the X, we wrote up a report saying we're not targeted. We have our core software model is not here. We're now rolling through our third-party partners to see who's there as well. They're unique phishing templates for Conti that's provided to our IR and intrusion detection team so we can create some YAR rules. The IOCs, those are easy. Import those to your threat detection platform. That's an easy upload. Those are easy wins. Sharing this with other partners, depending on the size of your organization, whether you want to put that in an FSISAC chat or whether the information sharing group, may or may not take legal oversight and approval. So again, we hit the 87-ish%, pivoted to look at the CVEs in use. Going all the way back to 2015, here are the CVEs. Now we can talk to our vulnerability management team to say, these are the ones in use by Conti. Are we 100% sure we patched all of these? You don't want to assume. Because unlike a large corporation, not only does Conti use patents, used the vulnerabilities, they had YouTube tutorials on how to execute the vuln plus step-by-step directions on how to do this. So here's Acme Corporation. They sell anvils to coyotes. They're vulnerable to CVE 2019-1385 and 1405. So if we don't have creds, we can pivot and use these because they are vulnerable for this. And it's not a week-long process to wait. They immediately pivot and go after the vulnerability. The long-term analysis of this ransomware software is fascinating. I'm still finding some gems in here for my I'd rather do this than watch television. But that's nothing. This is a 1.5-year old event, roughly. There are things you can glean from it, but it's not key, like a CIA, DIA, FBI role where you're going through and looking for the chain of command, you're looking for the personality quirks. This one guy says he likes to go on dates with people he meets in Bangkok. Oh, he's got funding, he can leave country, he's an international criminal. Can we work with the Thai liaison to render this person the next time they leave country because they are a cyber criminal for millions of dollars of theft? It's not what we're doing in the private sector, so not as important. These are things that we would break up into teams and have the different students go to parse the data. This is the insider threat team, this is the malware analysis team, and let them look at each bin and see how putting on the different lenses gives you a different perspective for this leak data. There's still data, this came out the past couple of weeks, that Conti gives advice for the ransomware operators, which is also great advice for red teams. So there's still data that can be used. We talked that Conti is going for insurance policies, right there's a screenshot. How they handle this, GDPR versus US data. The insurance policy in full so they can understand how to best negotiate with the targeted company. You'll say, but yeah, Will, but VX Underground releases this. Yes, they do. But you can look at the date. The last time this was modified is 6/30/2023, and the breach happened in February 2022. There's a lot that can happen in those 14, 15 months that I need to address for my corporation before VX Underground is the great work they do before they release this. A little bit of humor, they even have to avoid the appearance of NS not safe for work because there's a fantastic large fan manufacturing company, and they even had to notate it's nothing spicy, it's a fan company. So getting to the end of this, secure your own mask first, help others, document as you process data, just like anything else in cyber. Don't rely on your memory because you're going to forget it. Source, trust me. Using this Carver methodology doesn't require proprietary software. It's simple math in a spreadsheet, something you can take with you, corporation to corporation, agency to agency. You don't have to pay $30,000 a year. Discussion questions we'd have in class. Do you remove the insider threat? If you're Russia, knowing you're going to invade Ukraine, do you remove the one Ukrainian before this happens? Do you cut his access? That might tip their hand. I'm not sure. We don't need to pontificate. These are open-ended questions. On the other hand, you're the bad guy. You're running ransomware operations. You're going to invade another sovereign country. Doing the right thing probably is the most important thing on your radar. So is tipping your hand to the one Russian, the one Ukrainian who's opposing the Russian invasion, do you remove him before the invasion? Or do you put him on a special project, compartmentalize him away from all the other data so you don't tip your hand? I don't know. Is it better to leak all the data, the one and done, or to work covertly, working for U.S. government intelligence agencies or Interpol, whoever, report on plans, intents, and report covertly, put tracking software to allow for a bigger takedown? Which one's the greater effect? What the person did was fantastic. The cybersecurity community has been able to mitigate the risk from Conti, but what data are we missing? So again, that's the deeper seventh floor question of why are they doing it. Two more things. One, Conti's even got it right. No one, you can't see me pointing at the screen, no one will restore your health and no one will take care of you but you. Take a vacation. If you don't take care of yourself, who will? In wrapping this up, I gave this talk right before I spoke on voting machines at DEF CON. I had the thought, I've not been through this to see if Conti was targeting the US elections. I hadn't seen anything online, so I searched, didn't find anything where they're targeting this, but until you search yourself, don't assume someone else has done the work. You might be the first one to have that unique thought. And last is a little bit of a bonus. If you have a Mac, you have the still built-in MDLS, and we're going to try a demo. I don't usually do this. MDLS is metadata list. It's built into most modern Macs. So what you'll do is I went to gov.info to search for a PDF. Very simple. GovInfo overview 2009 or 1019 PDF. Have that stored here, and I go to Unix and terminal. There we go. It's going to work. There we go. So download the file. Have the file saved. MDLS. I'm going to just simply drag and drop. I know this is how you can do it in Unix, but drag and drop. And right here you can see this PDF was created by the author's name, what they used to create it, the file name, PDF library, version number, which is wonderful if you're going to do red teaming or spear phishing, because now you know this one person is vulnerable to maybe a CVE for that exploit. It's fantastic. You can see that this document was actually created by the Swiss using, I don't know, Office 95. But it's going to give you that metadata, where it came from, to, from. So when you share your personal data, you share a picture with someone from your iPhone, your GPS may or may not be on there depending on your settings, but this is a great way to extract a little bit more data from a PDF to see if the source is truly authentic with who they claimed it was from, or if it was just stolen from the web and shared as authentic from Bob Jones when it's really from Viktor Yushchenko. But that's it. It works on a Mac. It's also going to show you if there's a beacon in a PDF going back to show the progress as you read the beacon, but that's another talk for another day. Thank you for coming, and I appreciate your time.